we've already gone through a variety of different things as far as how we're going to use and evaluate the conformation of horses. So now I wanted to have everyone take a little bit of time and look at a couple of different pairs of horses and think about some of the things and categories that we've talked about. So we've got two horses here, and take just a moment and look at each horse and think about the different categories that we're going to use to evaluate them on. Which horse is more correctly balanced? Remember, we're looking at the proportion of the shoulder, the back, the hip, the length of the neck, the length of the head, the length of the back in relation to the underline, and the underline in relation to the ground. So those are the areas where we're looking at balance. Also, even though we just have a side view, I think you can look at some differences in muscling between these horses. We're looking through the shoulders and the hips, the forearm, the gadskin, and those various regions. Also, you want to evaluate the structure of these horses and going from head to toe with the head, the neck, the shoulder, the back, the top line, the shape, the angle of the shoulder, the angle of the pastern, how the neck ties in, the shape of the hip, the slope of the hip, how the legs stand down underneath the horses. You're not really going to be able to determine how straight they are in front and behind because we're just looking at a side view. Also, we need to look at breed and sex characteristics and overall quality and refinement. Alright, so if we first start looking and picking these two horses across at balance, or really just the first impression, I think it's probably pretty safe to say that this horse over here really kind of jumps out on you in a lot of different areas. The horse on this side, she looks like a nice little horse, however, there is quite a bit difference of size. When we're looking at overall balance, this horse is fairly correctly balanced. I mean, in her back, her shoulder, her hip. She's a little shallow in her heart girth. She's going to fall off a little bit in the shortness of her head. Some of the muscling types of things I think you can easily give advantage to this horse over here, where you can obviously see there's quite a bit more definition of muscling through her shoulders and her forearm, through her hip and down through her stifle. This mare is also very exceptionally balanced when you look at her shoulder, through the shoulder, the back, the hip. She's very long and lean in her neck and short and typey in her head. Some of the biggest differences in these two horses is going to be the overall structure, and you can really work from head to toe. Remember, we want a 2-to-1 ratio of top line of their neck to their underline, and this horse definitely has a much more desirable one of this. Another great big advantage of this horse is that the angle to the shoulder and the way the withers lie back on the back of this horse. These withers are much further back, allowing for a much more angulated shoulder, which also leads to a neck that ties in much higher between the front legs on this horse here as compared to this. This is a horse that's very upright and straight in its shoulder. The neck ties in deep. It also has a very deep neck to shoulder junction here and is not very proportionate on the top to the bottom line. In addition, you can see the shoulder is very straight, leading down to very straight pasterns. Excuse me. Another, also looking at this horse here, where we don't like her very much, is the top line. This horse dips down in her back, and so we're going to have a stronger top-lined horse over here. This horse on this side is a fairly decent turn to its croup. She's a little bit light and weak down here through her stifle. This horse is a very good turn to a croup and is very strong down here through her stifle. One negative I would say on this horse here is that I believe she's just a bit too straight in her hock or too posty in her hock as compared to the other horse on this side. Now, these are not the best quality of pictures I'll give you, but take another look at a pair of horses that probably are a little bit more similar in type, maybe a little bit more difficult to pick apart between the two of them, and think about some of the differences in which horse is more correctly balanced, heavier muscled, more desirable about his structure, quality and breed sex characteristics. And these are a relatively closer type of pair of horses. I would tend to lead to an overall more balanced, typier type of horse over here, like the angulation to its shoulder a little bit more correctly than this horse, with a longer, more elongated neck over here on the sorrel horse as compared to the Appaloosa horse. Also, we have a longer forearm in relation to his cannon bones, and we're a little bit of a high-kneed, high-hock horse over on this side. So again, a pair of horses with not a tremendous amount of difference between them, but both pretty high-quality horses. I would assume that they both look to be fairly heavily muscled. Now here's throwing in a little bit different of some breed characteristics. We've got a gelding or a stud horse here that's obviously a stock horse, and more of an Arab type horse over here. So you can see in this horse the muscle pattern, naturally the head and neck are going to be a little bit different. Arabs tend to be more level out over their croup in that, and a horse that will tend to be a little bit more lighter muscled. This horse here is a fairly well-balanced horse, looking at his neck, his back, his shoulder, maybe a little bit long over his top line, but again, a fairly good conformation type horse. Down here looking at just some attractiveness of a head, we've got some big eyes that are wide set out to the end, some large flaring nostrils, looks like a very attractive, intelligent looking head on this horse. Right, now take a moment and kind of look through these three horses and kind of pick them apart and think about the different categories and ways that we can evaluate them, and look at some similarities and differences between these three horses that we have here. Alright, as you had a minute to kind of look at them, in my opinion, I think the easiest thing to see is that this horse down here is one that probably really doesn't fit the other three. This is a mare. She's a little bit, it's a little difficult to see because these two are fit, look like they're ready to go in the show ring, where this looks like a mare, brood mare out on pasture. However, you can still see that this mare is a little bit more upright in her shoulder. She's shorter and deeper in her neck than what we would like her to have. In addition, the length of her back, she's a little bit long in her back, all right. As far as overall muscle, it's a little bit difficult to see. She looks like she's kind of adequate, but we really need to be able to see in front and behind of her. Some more of her structural kinds of things, I don't really like the way her shoulder is and the way her neck comes into her shoulder. She's a little bit long in her back. However, she looks to have a fairly good turn to her croup, has some width and stuff down through her stifle region, and has some good things about her, as she's a fairly deep-hearted kind of mare. These two you have to think a little bit more about and pick through them. They're a pair of pretty high quality horses, and when we think of our general balance types of things, both of them look to be fairly well balanced. There are some similarities and differences between them. Probably when we get into looking at general muscle, I would expect, when I would see this horse in front and behind, that he would be quite a bit heavier muscled by looking through, and has more ripple and bulge and definition, looking through from what we can see from the forearm and through his stifle and back here through his hip area. This horse, when we start looking at some of the structural types of things, back also on some balance, I'd like to see his neck stretched out just a little bit. This horse has a little bit more elongated with his neck. In addition, I think the paint horse here probably has a little bit longer hip than what our sorrel horse does over here. Some other the structural kinds of things, this horse is a little bit crusty in his neck, all right? This horse seems to be a little bit cleaner in his neck. Both have fairly good shoulders, it appears. Top lines are fairly similar. This one might be a little bit weak down through his top line here, and a fairly strong hipped horse. However, it appears to me that his hocks might be out from behind him just a bit, and he's a little bit of high knees with high hocks here, where this horse is definitely longer in his form and shorter in his cannon than this horse is over here. So this would be a relatively close pair of horses. I would expect that if you preferred this one, it's going to be an advantage of muscle that would overpower the sorrel horse here. This one might be a little bit more correctly balanced. Smooth is a smoother blending type of horse when you compare these two. Now here's a set of 4 horses that I'm really just going to leave you with, and we'll discuss later. But you can look at them as number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to let you just go ahead and take some notes of horse 1, horse 2, horse 3, and 4, and come up with an evaluation, a placing of these 4 horses. Yes, 2 and 3 you've seen before in some of the other slides that we've done. Some identifiers on these horses is we've got a buckskin. I would call this a chestnut. This is also a chestnut, and a palomino horse here. So I will give you just a few minutes to study these slides, and remember, look at the different categories that we evaluate them on, and try to evaluate between balance, muscle, structure from what you can see of it, and muscle from what you can see of it. Remember, it's very much of a disadvantage to try to evaluate true muscling from the side, but that's what we have to look at right now. And you cannot see a way of going naturally. You can see some breed characteristics. It's a little of a disadvantage because 1 and 4, I believe, are geldings or stallions, and 2 and 3 are actually mares. But just come up with something of an evaluation of them, and we'll go ahead and kind of talk about them a little bit and see what you guys come up with.